Hello and welcome to another episode of the N64 Beta Project. As always, this is the show where we take a look at Nintendo 64's unreleased games, prototypes, tech demos and ROM hacks. This episode we're finally getting around to delving into Viewpoint 2064. This is a game which way back at the start of the channel I always held an interest in due to it apparently being 100% complete but never released. There were rumours about the game from those who'd played it in its beta form, rumours as to why it was never released, and for many years there was a rumoured developer cart which was passed between collectors, and this was listed on eBay in 2015 for $3,000. Fast forward though to 2020, and in the midst of a worldwide problem, which I can't name because it will mess up the algorithm, a shining light was dropped out of nowhere with a ROM dump of Viewpoint 2064, at a time when we're all locked down and needing something new to play. The N64 community hero that is Racdym, who had previously uploaded gameplay of the cart, was involved, and I'll also note that another N64 community legendary member, Zoinkity, also created a translation patch, so you have both the Japanese and now English versions to play. So what's the background story of this one? Well, Racdym, who were best known as the developer for Snowball Kids series on N64, created this sequel to the classic early 90s title Viewpoint, which was a groundbreaking title in its heyday for its unique presentation and one of the better known Neo Geo releases. This game was due to be published in late 2000 and was even shown off at Space World in 1999 when it was announced, and it was stated as being 100% complete then, and even managed to get itself quite a lot of attention and coverage. So much so that game stores were already taking pre-orders for the title as a November 2000 release date was set. The box artwork and marketing were all complete, and then suddenly out of nowhere, the game started shopping for publishers, which would indicate the previous deal had fallen through. This led to the game's release being pushed back to the year 2001 with no specific new date given. This naturally came and went without the game's release, and so eventually, like other games before it, it was assumed that the series was now dead in the water. Now, the game's storyline in Viewpoint 2064 is your typical space invasion storyline. You're a pilot of a high-tech craft and are tasked with defeating an invasion of insect-like space beings. You're called into action by this giant flying eyeball-type creature and agree to help, and so from a storyline perspective it follows you, but the real reason is that you're promised a mythical stone which will restore your memory, which, surprise surprise, has been lost. Now, I've no idea how someone can lose their memory and yet still pilot a fighter craft, travel across the galaxy to do so, and come out victorious, but hey, that's Millennium Gaming for you. The storyline does have some development for your character. Not much so, and therefore I won't place any spoilers here, but it suffers to say that it's worth playing through to get the full storyline, but it's not Shakespeare, and so it will at least give you a resounding conclusion to the story once completed. Now, weak storyline aside, the first thing that will be of notice to you is that the game appears to be very similar to Star Fox 64 or Lilac Wars for my fellow Europeans. Now, I say that respectfully because if anything this looks like a poor man's Star Fox, but putting that to one side, the gameplay is perhaps where this will succeed or fail, and I'd say that this one's a mixed bag of sorts. To be clear though, the game is not 100% complete, but it is playable from start to finish. So it's worthwhile checking out, and for any purists, it's also fully playable on real hardware, which is a nice bonus. The game has 15 stages which follow a non-linear route. Like Star Fox, the first level once completed branches into different paths. Originally, like Star Fox, it would have been dependent on in-level objectives. You do get to choose which path to take at the end of each level, however this build, some of the branches are not implemented yet. I assume that this was because the final criteria for opening up the different paths in the levels was not fully decided upon, and so the game hadn't yet implemented it. Fortunately though, if you do want to check out every level, you can access them from the title screen from the get-go. Playing the game however actually makes you realise there's 3 different game endings, and combined with the multiple routes through the game, it shows us that there would have been some decent replayability here. The gameplay however is quite simple. The game gets progressively harder the further you travel, and by the final stages it does pack one heck of a challenge. The shooting mechanics are fairly basic, with your standard rapid fire being paired up with the ability to create a set of lock-on missiles for up to 8 targets. Now this lock-on mechanism, like Star Fox, is key to taking down multiple enemies quickly and also chaining them together to get power-ups and a higher score. Power-ups in the game are few and far between, and aside from the standard ones which bump up your health, you have an energy meter to allow a massive blast shot, which is useful for screen clearing. There are 3 options for your craft which will be useful when playing and add an elemental type flair to your weapons. Now I personally like the electric charge, which has a nice range and can make you, well, quite tanky to take down the lesser powered enemies and those which get a little too close to you. You also have the ability to block shots, which you really need to master in order to complete the game. Now I personally didn't like this mechanic and never truly got to grips with it. The blocking mechanic stops you from being able to shoot, and during the levels themselves the number of enemies will grow massively on screen, making it too slow for you to use. However, in boss battles it has a stronger purpose when you're only dealing with one enemy most of the time. The game doesn't require the expansion pack, which did seem a strange decision, as it would have been fairly late for the N64 release by all accounts, and the biggest problem I felt in the game was the total lack or any sense of speed. It just seems to plod along at a snail's pace, and as the draw distance is frankly horrific, certain areas of the game really just show how bad it is. Surely this is something that the expansion pack would have been able to assist with. There's a few other flaws with this build, including some objects having no hit detection, the invisible items which were due to be a secret in the game not actually being in this build yet, and some of the stages having completely unavoidable damage which instantly puts you at a disadvantage. There's also pacing issues where you can go for some time in the levels without any enemies being on screen. It's not just dogfighting, however, that the game consists of. Most levels have an awkward dodging section around the halfway point of each stage. You'll be tasked with not fighting enemies but instead working your way through an area, trying to find the correct path, dodging falling objects, or blasting your way through an asteroid field. Now sure, it breaks up the gameplay and offers something unique, but it doesn't really add anything to the overall gameplay experience. The controls, however, are very nice. They're fluid and responsive, and at no times when playing did I experience any times where I was shaking my fist angrily at the screen. Aside from the slow speed of the game, you can't argue that locking onto enemies, dodging attacks and shooting what you want does all feel natural. Now sure, it doesn't have Star Fox levels of movement, and that's perhaps what leads us into the biggest problem the game faced. With a crowded 2000 Christmas release period with many high profile games from the most popular studios, there really wouldn't have been much of a market for this game against such fierce competition. I would believe that the delay was probably tactically initially to avoid the strength of the competition, but also it's clear the game needed some more work. Now I suspect a decision was made to release the game in early 2001 because of that, and in all honesty the game did look more like a 1998 release, played like a lesser Star Fox, and with the popularity of the genre dwindling when the public wanted more FPS games rather than old school shooters. Just look at how good Star Soldier is, and its lack of sales as a prime example of this. The music and sound effects are also decent, and they have a distinct retro vibe to them, and as the game doesn't have any credits, I can't find out who was the composer, but in a kind way I want to say the music wouldn't have sounded out of place on a Sega Genesis. The effects too are decent, and they have a nice bass heavy rumble to them, which suits the on-screen action well. This also complements the level design, which from an art direction perspective is good. You get lots of different environments on the stages, and the environmental aspects like fire and water add a tactical element to how the enemies attack you, and so it does keep the gameplay fresh from start to finish. But as always, it's over to you. Have you played this yet? And if not, well, I really think you should. It would never have sold well in my opinion, and although I'm a fan of this genre of games, I personally would play Star Fox or Star Soldier over this on N64 if given the choice. This is a niche oddity on the console. A chance to play a new game on the system, so to speak, in this day and age is something that I'll always love. It's just a shame that this one has far too many flaws to make it a title I feel that we missed out on back in the day. But as always though, let me know your thoughts and feelings, comments and views on Viewpoint 2064 down below, and until next time.